as you're starting out in the First Descendant and you're basically working your way through the campaign on normal difficulty, you're feeling out some of the bosses, you're getting to know your character, and you're also starting to experiment with the mod system and essentially modding your Descendant as well as your weapons. It can be quite daunting to know what you should be spending your limited resources on. The first, I would say, 5 to 10 hours with the game, you will have to make some sort of decisions, some choices as to what you should be upgrading and what potentially gives you the biggest chance of success to get you through to the end of the normal campaign and therefore into hard difficulty, which essentially opens up the game. Now today in this video, I just want to talk about what I consider to be the 10 most important mods that you should be upgrading first. In other words, basically getting to their full value so that you get the most out of them. And this list is essentially broken up into what I would consider two parts or two categories, right? So we'll talk about 5 mods which I consider, important on the Descendant side, and we're going to use Glay as an example. But obviously my choices are for all Descendants. It's not specifically for Glay. And then we'll also talk about 5 for weapons, and I'll just use the Tamer there as an example. Once again, the idea here being that I'm giving you advice on these 10 mods, and this doesn't matter which Descendant you're playing, and also doesn't matter which weapon you're using on, with the perhaps the caveat of that it might not apply to sniper rifles, but I'll explain that once we get there. But first and foremost, just looking at your Descendant, I would say arguably one of the most important mods for you to max out would be increased HP straight off the rip. Basically defense, or let's say the ability to take damage in this game, is held up by a trifecta. There's HP, there's shield, and then there's defense. Now one of those is suboptimal to focus into, and that is shield. And that's really because while all 3 of them are about sustaining damage, HP is good for sustaining damage, defense makes your HP means more, and of course shield is a shield. The point is that one of these, shield, promotes an extremely defensive playstyle, which means that at the beginning of an engagement you are tough, but then as you start taking chip damage or you step in some fucking acid or something like that, you are going to lose your shield, and then you will have to play extremely defensive and avoid combat and avoid getting shot, avoid being in line of sight. And that basically means that during that time you're also not dealing damage. So that's what I mean by suboptimal. If you stack, however, HP and defense, it means not only can you stay in the fight longer, but you also have the opportunity of picking up health orbs, which basically increase your HP, or let's rather say heal you up, whereas there's no such thing for shields in the game. There's no pickup that you can pick up that quickly boosts your shield to full, and so this is inherently the thing. So I think it is overkill to stack all 3, and if you want to pick the best 2 out of the 3, it's HP and defense. So my first choice is obviously to max out HP. This is just going to mean a lot more survivability for you. I think this is the most jarring thing for players that go from normal to hard, or that play the game and then go into like the 3rd or the 4th void boss fight and then realize, oh my Jesus, there's a bunch of incoming damage, like what the fuck. So increase HP, and then basically as part of the same conversation, so number 2 is increased defense. So with these 2 together, you're gonna drastically increase the survivability of your character, and being alive longer means you can deal damage longer, you're not depleting your respawns, anything like that. And in situations where you are fighting like a void boss, it means that you can stay in the fight longer and you don't go down, putting more strain on your teammates to basically pick you up and so on. So I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Then for my 3rd pick, I'd say Nimble Fingers. And what Nimble Fingers does is it reduces your skill cooldowns. Now, like any game of this type, any looter shooter, the real fun in the game, although I will say this, the gunplay in the First Descendant is fucking delicious. The fun comes in using your abilities, your skills, your powers. And Nimble Fingers just gives you more of that. Now, a lot of the fucking characters, a lot of the Descendants in this game have really, really broken abilities that are on possibly, let's say, long-ish cooldowns, like 60, 65, 70 seconds. So any time that you can chop off that, and in this case a massive piece of it, like 25%, is huge, because you're going to be able to use those abilities more often and that translates into more survivability or more damage or anything like that. Like in the case of like Ajax, for instance, it means that you have access to your defensive abilities quicker. In the case of someone like Blair, is it Blair, the fire dude, it means you can deal those abilities faster. So I think kind of like this makes sense. Lower cooldowns means more abilities, means more fun. The fourth one is actually skill expansion. So I don't have, this is skill extension. Skill expansion I'm a huge fan of. Now on Glay you wouldn't really use skill expansion, but I'll quickly scroll down here and I'll find it for you. So this is it over here. What skill expansion does is it increases the skill effect range, and this only applies to certain skills, right? So there's certain things that you can't increase the range of, like for example, I can't increase the range of Predator Instinct. It's a fucking ability that empowers my shooting. It's bullets. It doesn't increase the range, anything like that, so it doesn't work. However, a lot of the Descendants, once again, like Freyna and Viessa and pretty much Lepic and pretty much anybody that has like an ability that shoots, leaves something on the ground, creates an explosion, anything like that, this can affect the size of that, and it's a drastic increase. I mean, it's almost 100% increase. So in the case of like using Freyna, for example, you can drop a pool of fucking poison on the ground and enemies can run across it, and the size of that pool is kind of cute, but with this on, that pool is basically double the size, which means more of an area of a room is covered, which means the enemies can run through it. This is, for example, a fucking goat mod for something like Bunny with her fucking power emissions, those electric shocks around her, because this essentially creates a bigger circle, almost doubles up the size of the circle, which means that you're covering a bigger amount of area, you're getting more shocks in. So really, really good. And then for the fifth one and the last one, when it comes to specifically talking about Descendant mods, it has to be your sub attack mod. So there's a whole bunch of these. Shock Punch is going to be the first one that you come across in the game when you are looting. But there's a whole bunch of these. If I could just on the normal, and there's some other ones. There's kicking, there's a short sword, there's a whole bunch of them. They're all like, it's a preference thing. Like, do you want to fucking hit something? Do you want to hit it with a sword? There's also other ones here, like for instance, that augment your grappling hook and things like that. But the bottom line is this slot, this sub module slot, is super important for you, because whatever you put in here, whether it's the shock punch or the kick or whatever like that, any leveling up that you do into this module actually gives you back module capacity. So this is a way for you to actually increase your module capacity just by putting something in here and spending some Kuiper on it to level up. So super important. You can basically give yourself another slot that's available even when you're full of module capacity. Dropping something in here and then putting some points into it can actually open up another slot, and you can fit more things in and basically make your character sexier. And then over on the weapon side, and like I said, using the Tamer as an example here, but these five that I'm going to choose here, they are good for any weapon. I would say maybe when it comes to scout rifles and sniper rifles or so on, maybe not. Maybe there's some other choices that you can make there, but even then the argument can be said that it will up your DPS, and a lot of the times that's the point. You want your guns to you want your DPS to increase, whether you're shooting more bullets per minute or whether those bullets are hitting harder. That's the point. So the first three out of the five can actually be spoken together in one fucking breath, because like my example or my conversation about HP and defense and fucking shield and all that stuff, some of these things are just like an auto include. And if you don't put these in, you are actively damaging the damage output of your weapon. I don't think you can reach the same levels of damage if you don't include these. So the three that I'm of course referring to is the trifecta here, which is rifling reinforcement, fire rate up, and action and reaction. Now in terms of which one you should upgrade first out of the three, the point is you're going to get rifling reinforcement first, secondly you're going to get fire rate up, and then later on you're going to unlock, or you're going to pick up action and reaction somewhere. So that kind of like naturally tells you which ones, the rate that, or the way around that you should upgrade. However, if you are waiting and you haven't upgraded any of these fucking three for some reason, and now you're looking at it, you're going like, holy shit, let me upgrade something, then I would say you should absolutely go for action and reaction first. The bottom line is rifling reinforcement and action and reaction both increase your firearm attack percentage. That's basically like a hardcore DPS increase to your gun. And action reaction does it considerably more than rifling reinforcement, basically double. But that's because action reaction gives you a slight, how can I say, disadvantage in that it increases your recoil by 20%. But almost none of the guns in this game have messy recoil that you cannot control by just figuring out like the way how the recoil basically pulls up on the gun or something like that, and then just adjusting for it. So this 20% is going to be super negligible. And then further on, if it's really that big of a fucking issue for you, there's actually mods that you can put in that again reduce your recoil, and you can basically take it back to 0 or even negative if you want. But these three together are basically the standard 3 slot ins that you do on every single weapon. The one that I haven't discussed here yet is of course fire rate up. This just increases your fire rate of your weapon by 25%. Meaning the faster the gun shoots, the more bullets go into the enemy, and then meaning the more damage that you deal. So this can be devastating on things like a slow shooting machine gun. It can actually turn a slow shooting machine gun into a fucking monster. And then last but not least, if you put this into something like a fucking python or something like that, it literally becomes a bullet hole that just like melts shit. It's like a fucking barbecue out here. So these three together, you can't go wrong with that. But then in slot 4 and 5, firstly in slot 4 is for me weak point sight. Now, while just when you're out there, you know, grinding away on content and everything like that, and mission to mission, everything like that, weak points might not be that big a deal, because a lot of the times you're basically fighting humanoid enemies that run at you, and it's like a fucking shot in the head or something like that, and they're dead. And that's regardless of whether you have weak point damage or not. But this plays a huge role when you start fighting the Void Intercept bosses. And that's because they have special areas on their body, of course, that you can shoot, and you can get that by pinging them on keyboard or mouse. It's fucking tab. On PC, I don't know what it is. I'm assuming it's one of your control sticks on controller. But the point is that you can see where the weak points are. It's usually in the chest, in the middle, and then on the shoulder pads, and sometimes in the head, and so on. And you can shoot that, and it's going to deal additional damage. Now, there's a reason why I don't pick crit damage and crit rate as the two mods here, and there's two reasons for it actually. Firstly, it's because that's kind of like a two-hit punch. It's implied that if you take crit rate increase, then to really get the benefit out of that, you should also be increasing the crit damage of a weapon, right? That kind of makes sense, because the point is, it doesn't matter if you crit a lot, but your crit damage multiplier is only like 1.2. because then it's really not ramping up the damage. However, you will notice something insane if you increase the crit rate, meaning you're critting more, and then you're saying like whenever you crit, it's times 2.5 damage or times 3. That's fucking massive. So the reason why I didn't include it is for that. It's kind of like a two-hit punch, so it would take up 2 out of the 5, and I kind of have a 5th one that I do want to mention. The other reason is that a lot of people, because we've been in games like this, we've been fucking basically tuned to understand that crit is super important, crit damage is super important, try to stack it on fucking everything. But that's not necessarily true in this game, because all the weapons in this game, now, not just weapon types, but all the weapons in this game have different stats when it comes to like their innate crit rate. And that means the crit chance. And the point is that this game, how crit chance works in this game is that when you add 15% crit rate, you don't add 15% crit on top of whatever's on the weapon. You add it as a percentage of the base. So in the example here now, just bear with me, because behind my face here, you'll see it says firearm critical rate, and it says 10%. That means the base rate of the tamer is 10%. Okay, so if I add a fully upgraded mod on here that increases the critical, rate of this weapon by like 25%, that's only going to take the 10% to 12.5%. which is really not that big a difference. Yes, you are going to crit 2.5% times more, but the sacrifice that you're making in terms of module capacity for that, and then to add in the critical the critical damage increase, means that you are sacrificing 2 slots for a, let's say, suboptimal increase in damage. Where like in the Tamer's case, it's much better to actually just stack weak point damage. So this is something that you have to bear in mind when you are building out your guns. I oftentimes see this where people are putting weapons down and they have like a 5% crit rate chance or a 10% crit rate chance, and then they're just stacking all this fucking crit stuff into it, and they're wasting 3 to 4 slots on this. Whereas you could see a lot better, yield from the weapon by basically just exploiting weak point. Python, the submachine gun, is a fantastic example of this. Python by default has insane fucking weak point scaling. And to see people, I mean, you can do it. Python's a fucking strong gun regardless. You can put the crit shit in there if you want, but you are going to see way better numbers. You're going to see the gun perform way better if you actually focus on the weak point side of it. So just a small example there. And then for the fifth one is expand weapon charge. Now, basically what expand weapon charge is, let me find it here quickly over here. It actually increases your magazine size. Now, while this is not like the sexiest mod late game, and you might replace it with something else that lets you squeeze out a little, bit more crit or a little bit more weak point or something like that, for the beginning part of the game, this can be really fun to use because it takes a lot of the weapons in the game that have like a clip of like 30 or 25 or something like that, and takes their clip to like, with maybe the assist of other mods, you can get 45-50 bullets into the gun, which overall makes the weapon feel a lot more usable, feel a lot more fun, because you're not fucking spending 2 minutes out of 5 minutes reloading your weapon. And this can actually turn some of the assault rifles and some of the submachine guns into something that can actually be used and can be, I would say, quite enjoyable. Again, like I said, this is something that you might swap out later on, because they are for sure much better mods that are in the rare category or so on later on, that do this and give you an additional effect, for example. But I really enjoy this, and this is a DPS increase, by the way. If you put this into the tamer, it takes you from 100 bullets to 150 bullets. That means that's an additional bunch of seconds that you can spend on target without having to reload and putting bullets into an enemy, which translates to more damage, and meaning that you contribute more to, for instance, the damage on a void boss. But that's it. Those are the 10 mods. These are the 10 that I would consider spending your Kuiper and your money on first, because they will feature in almost every single weapon and every single descendant, regardless of when you unlock them. You will always use HP, you will always use defense, you will always use rifling reinforcement, fire rate up, action reaction, all of those, because they are just the best in their class, and they work on every single descendant except for Glaive, for example, where like shield and stuff like that doesn't matter, but defense and HP does. Just mentioning that again. And then in the case of like I said, sniper rifles and stuff, which might not directly benefit from fire rate because you don't want to be rapid firing them. Those are about like taking aim and shooting. So yeah, but yeah, that's the list of 10. That's it for the video. Thank you so much for watching, especially if you made it this far. Let me know in the comments down below which mods you enjoyed that I missed, that you think I should be adding to this list. Tell me which ones that I have on this list you don't agree with, which ones you do agree with. If anything, just tell me what you're enjoying in the First Descendant right now. It is the game that has me completely and utterly, attentionified at the moment. It's like the only thing that I'm playing, and I'm thoroughly enjoying it, and I'm sure there's a whole bunch of you out there that feel basically the same about it. Keep an eye on the channel for much more the First Descendant content coming. I've got a couple of build videos dropping over the weekend. I'd love you guys to have a look at that and let me know what you think. Other than that, it's just super important that you have a fantastic morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world. Until next video, fucking cheers.